be a sponge, and then bring the juice.
By focusing on your improvement, by focusing on your progress, and eliminating any fixed mindset that you may have and acts of perfectionism, then you encourage your own mastery.
On some level, we do what we want to do 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes it may not seem like that, but if I'm choosing to work instead of sleep, what I'm actually saying is keeping my job is more important than sleeping.
I'm tired of this. I'm tired of getting beat. What can I do to get over this hump? So mentally, that's when I kind of put that forefront, like, hey, it's either all or nothing.
I like to put failure in quotations because I don't believe that failure is true failure if you're looking at it with the right mindset.
The truth is, the journey to greatness is hard. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, and every day you have to decide what you value, what you want to pursue, and what you want to achieve. And if you dig deep enough, if you push hard enough, we all have what it takes to be great. Welcome to the Edge of Greatness. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Edge of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Charles Schultz, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, a mental performance consultant with experience working with athletes ranging from golf and baseball to water skiing and show jumping, Coach Nicole Erickson. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
Absolutely. So in preparation for this conversation, I was looking through some stuff to figure out kind of what your background is and what you've done. And I noticed a really interesting picture of you on the water with a fishing pole. So I got to know, what'd you catch?
That day I caught a sailfish.
Oh, a sailfish. Do you go often then?
I try to.
Okay.
I try to go often. Yeah. It's me and my dad's thing. We love to go offshore fishing. So
I love that. Awesome. So you mentioned in your bio when I was looking through some things that you had a hard time as an athlete where you were hard on yourself, you were emotional, you lacked confidence. Can you tell me about a time when your mindset let you down?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. I can from all the way back then. I can give you some examples. I know, when my senior year, my high school career, I tore an ACL my sophomore year, going into my sophomore year of high school. And so I really had a lot of time to come back, right? Because I was only a sophomore. Junior year was going to be a big year for me. And I remember going through my junior year as an athlete, summers for basketball, summers like when all the showcase tournaments happen. And at that point in time, I had a lot of thoughts surrounding whether or not I wanted to continue to play in college, if I actually wanted to go and do that. And I know deep down I really wanted to, but if I made the decision not to, there was a concern about, what my parents would think. I was really concerned about that, and it affected me. I was scared that I was going to let them down. Felt guilty a lot if I had a thought of not continuing to play, just finish out my high school career and go to college, because of the investment that they had in me. They had money, time, travel, you name it, games, right? Like I said, time. So it was really hard for me. And I was constantly going back and forth, and I knew ultimately I wanted to stay, but that it was in the back of my mind. And I guess, it definitely affected me on court, but it also affected me off court. And so I wouldn't say it necessarily let me down, because, for me, I ended up having a really great conversation with my dad, and we kind of worked through that together. And so it led me to have that conversation, and to, in the relationship that I had with him. So letting down in a way, but also not necessarily, right? The mind does things for a reason, and it usually leads you in a direction where you're better on the other side. So.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I have 2 young children and a third on the way. And so for me, that conversation right there is an interesting one, because what I want to know is, as a parent, what can I do to make my young athlete when they become one,
Yeah.
feel safe to pursue whatever journey is best for them and not feel, like you said, like they're gonna letting me down.
Yeah.
Because I know that's a fear, because I probably had that same emotion, that same fear when I was struggling with whether or not I wanted to keep pursuing sports, whether I wanted to go down this path or that path.
Yeah.
They put a lot of time into that. So how do we as parents help our young athlete know that, it's their decision, it's their way, it's okay?
I think that's a really great question. And I have been asked that before. And I always, communication's key, right? Communication is key. And then also the feedback that you're giving them. So becoming more aware of your own body language, or the conversations that you're having, with you and your partner, or you and the coach in front of the athlete, right? You may think, you may talk and have those conversations even with your athlete, and for them, they may perceive that as something completely different than what you're putting down, right, or saying. And so I think just becoming more aware and having that open communication of, hey, like, this is what I mean by this, or asking them questions, right? Telling them, because even when parents have, like, my parents were very supportive, very open, and I still felt that guilt. I still did. And they still will, but it's just continuing to support and be encouraging. And again, that awareness piece is huge, and that open communication is huge.
Yeah.
And also leaning into your values. So understanding what you believe in as a parent, and how you can use that to help build a relationship with you and your athlete.
Kind of keeping on the same lines, how do we help our young athlete not tie themselves to the sport that they play?
That is a good question too, because that happens a lot, especially like when they're playing year round. I mean, my identity was completely tied to basketball, completely, and I was playing year round. And that injury, as much as it sucked, right, it also kind of helped me. It was kind of a wake up call, like, hey, this can happen at any time, and it can be done. So how can you help your kids not tie it? So I think, understanding, and this is just very broad, but helping them to understand that there's more to them than just a sport, right? So a lot of times the conversations you have, right, I'm going back to communication, is all about the sport, right? That's all you all do is going to the courts, going to the fields, right, and back, like that, doing other things with them, letting them explore other things. And some athletes, they may not want to. They may feel nervous to leave that, especially if their identity is already high. And so it's not like, going in and be like, hey, not allowed to practice today, let's go do something else. Let's pick a new hobby. No, maybe like sprinkle it in, start small. But for someone where they're at, like you said, young kids haven't even started playing yet, just keeping in mind the process, not the outcome, the results, right? And then also allowing them to explore other parts of them, not just being a basketball player or a baseball player or a golfer. Right?
That makes sense. So yeah. With knowing who you were as a high school athlete to now where you're at today, can you tell me a little bit about your journey to what led you to becoming a mental performance counselor?
Yes. And so when I decided, so I ended up tearing a second ACL the summer of my senior year. And so, and I still, hey, I can come back from this, and I could try. And I just decided, since I had already done 2, I was just gonna play for fun, go to college. And when I got to college, I actually was thinking about doing PT. I wanted to do physical therapy because of my injuries, right? And so, but I took nutrition. I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm taking all these STEM classes that I need to take in order to go to PT school. And so I was taking psychology, and I learned about sports psych. And like I said, being an athlete that went through injury, being someone that was hard on myself constantly, having that putting that pressure on myself, I knew if I had tools back then, I would have been a much better player. Because I was a really hard worker too. And so I knew that also, right, if I had a mental performance coach, I would have practiced and drilled that sort of stuff as well. And it would have just helped me the long term. And I wanted to provide that for all athletes, because it's something that is now professionally, you hear it more and more every day, that professional athletes have it. But what about the youth? Okay, what about college? College is growing now too, where they have mental performance coaches and counselors. But you know, there's a need for it, and there's a need to understand that, hey, you are going to have pressure, you are going to be nervous, but how can we manage that? And I just felt like I wanted to fill that need for as many people as I could. It was just like, this is it, you know, it was like a calling. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So for those of my listeners who don't fully understand, what is the difference between a mental performance coach and a sports psychologist?
Oh, that's another really, really great question. So a sports psychologist is a licensed mental health professional. So they're usually licensed counselor, psychologist, licensed in, PhD in psychology, and again, licensed. Maybe they've gone to med school for psychiatry. Who knows, right? But that's usually the sports psychologist. So they can help you with deeper mental health needs and issues, right? So if you're someone with an eating disorder or anxiety or depression, right, that they can help you with that. So they're helping you address the mental health need, and then also helping you with overall well-being and your sport and other areas of life. Okay. Mental health or mental performance coach or mental performance consultant is someone that usually they can have their PhD in sports psychology, master's in sports psychology. There is a certification, so certified mental performance consultant. And these individuals are strictly performance based. So that's me. And I'm unable to help anyone with their mental health needs, right? I stay within the performance. So I take the knowledge that I gained from school and then teach those tools to the athletes.
Okay. So yours is more action-based on how to perform better in different situations and how we can use our mind to overcome adversity and obstacles and stuff like that, where the psychology side of it, the psychologist side of it would be more like actual mental health issues that may require a deeper level of help, and maybe even like the medication side. Is that kind of where? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was kind of following along, because I know there's some differences, and I've seen and talked to both, but I've never actually asked that question. So it was one of those I was kind of trying to get a feel for what those were. So what I want to know now is, what lights you up about what you do?
Oh, wow. There's a couple of things. Can I say?
Yeah, let's go.
When an athlete, or a coach or a parent, whoever it is, when they have that moment where it just all clicks for them, that is a really, really great moment to be a part of. And then also just within the sessions, when they are able to share things right with me, and they're open in doing that, that's also a really great moment for me, right? So like, you get some athletes, they don't necessarily talk about what they're feeling before a performance or during a performance, or they don't want to address their thoughts with a lot of others, right? And so to create that space where they can start becoming more aware and address those things is a really, like, it's an awesome moment for me. I really enjoy that. And then, obviously that moment where it just all clicks and it's working and they're using it and they're practicing it and it's just like eye-opening. That's another really awesome moment for me too.
Yeah. I think one of the things that really draws me to the mental performance side of things is that it, in my opinion, balances out my belief of what the pursuit of greatness is. There's a lot of things that happen where you don't see results. You don't see immediate return on investment. Yes. And so what I want to know is, how do you create buy-in for doing the daily efforts, for doing the small things that you might not see an immediate return on?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's another really great question, especially nowadays, right? Like you're saying, we have immediate everything. And so our patience constantly goes lower and lower with trying to succeed. And then on top of that, like I was just so Carlos Alcaraz, right, 19-year-old, just won US Open men's final, Grand Slam. He's the number one in the world, and it's, you know, a lot of times when we see those really great athletes, we assume that they're just like they've always been great, right? They've never failed. And I feel like that's what happens with these youth athletes. They get in their head like, oh, well, I want to be just like them, and I have to succeed at everything, and I have to be number one. And I found this really cool article, interview between him and I think it was with ATP Tours or something. And he talked about, you know, no one ever told me I was going to be the best. No one told me that. I just worked really hard, and I created a team around me, and it took 3 years, you know, to get to this point. And that's probably just his professional career. There's definitely more to that. And then it wasn't always roses, he said. There was a lot of struggles. There was a lot of failure. He had fear, and he worked through that. And through that progress, through those 3 years, he got to where he wanted to be. And so I think just examples like that helps, right, to get buy-in. Examples and to show athletes, hey, this doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen at the snap of a fingers. Look at, you know, using professional athletes and actually showing them their story, not just the, hey, they're the best on their team and they've won 10 national titles or whatever, you know, because that's not realistic. And then, so that, and I also like to use metaphors, because people click with metaphors. So like I use a staircase metaphor, you know, we have to create a base, we have to create a foundation. When you started playing your sport, could you hit the ball like you hit the ball now? Right? No. And how many years have you been doing that? You know, depending on the athlete, could be 10, it could be 20. Right. And so that's the mental side. So to expect and a lot of them didn't train the mental side growing up, because it's just now becoming more of a resource to all athletes. So I like to use things like that. So professional examples, because it really clicks for individuals. Using the sport itself for the physical and technical side, or even just like, how do you bake a cake? You can't snap your fingers and bake a cake. You got to go through the recipe. And right now we're pulling out the eggs. You know, we're pulling out the ingredients. We're not sticking the cake in the oven or putting the frosting on it yet, right? So something as simple as that too, I feel like creates the buy-in. Yeah.
You mentioned that the athlete that won the tennis the U.S. Open was never told that he was the best. Do you think that telling a young athlete that they're special or they're good or they're the best is a good or a bad thing?
That's a good question. And I feel like it's how you communicate it to the athlete. I was actually asked that recently, which is so funny, but you know, you see different things. If they're constantly told they're the best and oh my gosh, they're going to be amazing and all this stuff, you know, depending on how the athlete is, you know, genetically what they have going on, as well as the environment at home and on court, they can perceive that and take that in many different ways, right? Like you have the athletes that have been told, hey, you're going to be the best. Like I've seen athletes like that, and they have a high fear of failure. Right? They are, because they don't want to, that's who they are. They're the best. And so if they play someone that isn't as good as them, they may get even more nervous, right? Because they don't want to lose to someone that's not as good as them, because then they're not who everyone says they are, right? And that goes back to that identity piece. And there's more like self-criticism and all that. And on the flip side, and then they may work like way too hard. Right. Yeah. On the flip side, if you tell some athletes, they don't train as hard because they think they're the best. And so then they start to dip down. So it all just depends. Yeah. And again, I think it's good to have encouragement, but it's, you know, how are you communicating that to them, and helping them to create a balance. Right. Yeah.
So interesting thought here. If it was your kid and they were talented and you knew they had potential, how would you approach it?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't have kids yet, so I really want them. So if they had a lot of talent, and again, I think it would depend on how the kid took that, encouragement and how they saw themselves, right? If I started to notice, hey, he or she, they, whatever, they are, they seem a bit more tense on court. They are really nervous before games. Then I might, approach that situation differently, because for me, I know that, hey, you are the best, but that doesn't define who you are. Like, you don't have to win every match. I don't, and let's work on that. I just want you to have fun today. And that's easier said than done at times. But on the flip side, if they get a little too cocky, then we got to bring that in a little bit. We got to say, whoa. You still need to practice, and you still need to, be a good sport and respect everyone around you. Right. So it's just paying attention to what they're doing and how they're taking that feedback, and then managing it as a parent, I would say, is what I would do.
No, I love that. That's perfect. That's perfect. Because I do agree. I think it's a multifaceted question with changing landscape as you go. Because you have to read, if they're very confident, that's not a bad thing if it's on the court, as long as they're still working hard off the court and they don't become arrogant and they don't think that they can just stop working. There's that balance that we have to figure out what that looks like. So I like that answer a lot. I recently saw that you ran a poll about motivation or action. And I love this question because it's something that I deal with a lot with my athletes, that they show up and, I'm just not motivated today, or, I'm feeling really good. I'm really motivated today. And I'm curious, what side of the fence do you land on behind what comes first, motivation or action?
I say action.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, action.
So tell me more.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, right, we can't control our motivation, or at least I don't believe we can, right? And like, there's a lot of days where I try to stay healthy, so I like to work out, and I'll tell you, most days I don't want to wake up and go to the gym. I don't know about you, but that's just, I don't want to do it. And so it takes myself to wake up and drive to the gym and just do it. And usually after I warm up, I'm like, all right, here we go. Like, let's go, right? Music's blaring. I'm like, I'm ready. And so that's just one example, but we can't necessarily control how we're feeling or how motivated we may be. We could do things to maybe put ourselves in an opportunity where we may feel more motivated, right? So like, I wake up every morning and I may say, you want to be healthy, so let's go, right? And that is a good reminder of, hey, this is one of my values of staying healthy and being healthy, and that reminder may get me going a little bit more. But I believe it takes the action, and not necessarily the motivation's a bonus. It's a bonus, or else we would never get anything done.
I would tend to agree with that. So what are some tips that you would suggest us to try to get more action oriented versus waiting to feel like it's the right time?
Yes. Okay. I would say definitely address whatever you're feeling in that moment first, and acknowledging, the feeling and the thoughts that come up. Because I starting my business, example, there was a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear, like having to go to talk to people, emailing people. I didn't want to do it. I didn't start my Instagram like 4 months in, because I did not want to do it. And there was a lot of fear there. And there was thoughts of like, no one's going to follow you. No one's going to like your stuff. Like, no one's going to like what you have to say. All these thoughts. My mom was telling me all these things. And so acknowledging those things and becoming more aware, I think, is just helpful in itself, because then you could know, hey, I know I feel fearful right now. And I know that my mind is telling me that these things to stop me. Then it's, what do I want to do? What do I want to stand for? And I think that's the most important part. So going back to my example with working out, I want to live a healthy life. I want to live a long and healthy life. And that's really important to me. And so being in touch with your beliefs and what you want to stand for as a person, or as person, athlete, consultant, right, coach, whatever it is, that's so important because that's what's really going to drive you. That's what comes from inside. So it's getting in touch with those things, your beliefs, what's meaningful to you, and using those to say, okay, I want to get this done because this is who I want to be and how I'm gonna feel most fulfilled in life. And that's how I kind of overcame that fear of I didn't even overcome it. I was still scared. I still get scared posting videos. Are you kidding? It's not fun. But I do it because I want to help as many athletes as I can. And that's really important to me. And it's not about the likes or, who's gonna, whatever. I am just trying to get my name out there. And so once I was able to acknowledge that fear and what my mind was telling me, I was able to say, you know what? My values are more important to me. So I would say those two things.
You mentioned fear a few times so far in this conversation, and I love that topic because there's always this thought like, face your fears, eliminate your fears, get rid of, and I don't think we can ever eliminate our fears. No matter how good we get at something, no matter how much we do something, no matter how long we do something, fear is going to be present. So what are some ways that you take your fear and face it head on?
And that's also so obviously acknowledging it. Like a lot of us, we don't want to. We don't want to acknowledge that we're feeling nervous or fearful because we're just trying to avoid it or like get rid of it or, suppress it. No, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. And then, being able and learning how to acknowledge it is important. And then I would say channeling it, right? So it's like, and you have to be able to learn, and in acknowledging it, it's creating space for it. So, making peace with the fact that, hey, I'm going to be nervous or I'm going to be fearful when I step in front of this group, right? And talk to them about mental performance training. I will. And it sucks and it doesn't feel great, but I can allow it to be here with me, right? And that takes time to learn how to do. That's part of like what I teach athletes, right? So it's creating a way to make peace with the fear and acknowledging it. And then it's okay, now that I've created room for it, how can I use it? Okay. And I'm going to give it, like, coming on to the podcast, because I've only done a couple, I was nervous. I felt nervous. And I was from this morning, I was feeling nervous. Seriously. And it's like, how can I channel this energy right now? Like, I know I feel nervous. I know why. It doesn't feel great, but it's so much energy. And how can I use this to be productive right now? I used it during my workout. I jammed out in my car on the way here. And now I'm generating it through the conversation we're having. I'm engaging and listening to you and trying to do my best to give you great information for your podcast. So once you learn how to acknowledge and make space for it, make room for it, then it's okay, now how can I channel this energy? Because emotions always give us energy.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny that you mentioned that you're nervous because I've done 100 and this will be 119 of these conversations. And every single time before I hit record, before I come on and before I meet the guest, I'm always a little nervous. I'm always a little bit on edge. And I take it back to like my playing days because this is now my performance opportunity. I do all this preparation and this is my performance. Yep. And if I wasn't a little bit nervous, if I wasn't a little bit fearful, then I wouldn't be at my best. And that's how I look at it because the big games are always, they matter. So the performances matter. And if I didn't care, I wouldn't be nervous. So I care, therefore I get nervous and I get uncomfortable and I have to settle myself in, which is why I always try to start with something a little more fun, like the fishing question. Yeah. Hopefully it helps settle you in as well, but but yeah, that's kind of where I go.
Yeah. And I think so. You make a great point, right? Like nerves show that you care. And all our emotions, they illuminate things for us. They show us things. Like they're meant to be there, right? And so that's just a really great point. It means you care. It'd be weird if you didn't care, right? Really weird. Like, do you get nervous when you make coffee in the morning? No, right? But like you said, there's preparation behind it. It's part of what you love to do. Like, yeah, there's gonna be nerves. Yeah.
So one of the hardest things to do in sports and life and business and everything else is trust that we're ready for the big moment. Mm-hmm. How do you help those you work with take that leap when they're performing?
Yeah. And what I really like what you said is trust for the big moment. Because a lot of times if you try to say, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just another day. But it's not. It's not another day. And again, sooner we are to allow it to be that, it's a big day, but I'm doing what I always do on this big day, the better we're going to be. Now the trust comes in, and you've heard me a lot talking about like openness with internal experiences. That's a big one. So teaching athletes how to do that, and first of all, just become more aware of what's going on in their head and body is important. And then controlling focus, so being more present, learning how to shift your focus when you need to, is a big thing that I teach. And then I keep talking about values, doing what matters to you. And so in combination with all of those, athletes start to begin to trust themselves more because they're more aware of what's going on up here, right? And they in their head, and it's not like, oh my gosh, right? I'm feeling nervous. So, oh my gosh, I can't control my anger or whatever, or why are these thoughts happening? I shouldn't be having these thoughts. Well, let's talk about it. Let's learn some more. And then once they're able to learn that, they feel more mentally prepared. And then they're able to trust themselves more. They're able to execute. And so sounds simple, but it takes time.
Simple,
Yeah.
not easy, right?
Simple, not easy. Yeah.
In your experience, what's the hardest thing for people to embrace about mental training or mindset training?
Yeah. The most difficult thing, I think it just really depends on the individual and where they're at, right? Like I've had some athletes that come in and they're still, as far as awareness and acknowledging, they just know that they're so nervous that they don't want to play games, and that's where they're at, right? Whereas others come in and they're like, this is what I know, it's a lot deeper, and then we can attack that situation. And so as far as difficulty, I think it just really depends on where the athlete is when they come to see me. I think, and I keep going back to this, acknowledging the thoughts and the emotions is a big piece, because a lot of times we know like the baseline emotions, like, oh, I felt angry, oh, I felt fear, but then once you start diving deeper into like what you're also feeling, because there's a lot more, that could kind of be, are we ready for this? And the same with thoughts. Everyone is very critical of themselves. Our brain's constantly pushing thoughts at us, right? And sometimes those thoughts can be really nasty and mean, and to acknowledge those and write them down and put them in front of us, that could be pretty tough too. But it's really just gauging where they're at when they come. Yeah.
So do you have like an assessment that you do to determine where somebody might be when it comes to their mental abilities, mental performance, back set skill, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So as far as a formal assessment, I don't. I've actually created one recently that I want to start using more. But usually when I do my first consultation, I just have a few questions that I like to ask, and then I build from there. So like going deeper, asking specific things to get a better idea as far as where they are. And it helps me to gauge, okay, I get a better idea, and then obviously I take notes and I'm able to go back to that and create the plan around that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's something that you do when you feel like your emotions are starting to take the wheel in a situation?
Yeah. And I've been practicing this, so I've worked on, this is something that I did again today. But when my emotions, I feel like they start to take over, it's recognizing that they're taking over, right? And not fighting them, not struggling with them, because that's usually our like knee-jerk reaction, is to like fight back at them, especially when it's really uncomfortable emotions. And so it's just acknowledging, like when I'm having a really difficult conversation, let's just say, right? In those difficult conversations, if I feel, an intense anger or disappointment, or I'm feeling upset, it's like in my head being present with that and saying, okay, I feel this right now. But I need to focus on what this person's saying to me. And so I'm going to shift my focus there and just allow this anger to just sit with me, right? Rather than usually when we feel angry in a, difficult conversation, our urge is to just yell back at the person or be nasty or whatever, disrespect them. And so it's not necessarily fighting that urge, but just understanding that, hey, this is what's coming up for me. And this is where I feel it. And I'm just going to breathe into that space and keep my head level, right? Keep my focus level on what they're trying to say, not like what I'm going to say back, right? Just hearing them out. And that's just an example. But like this morning, like I knew I was feeling nervous. Usually when I feel nerves, it's usually in my chest and in my stomach. And I feel a little weak. And so just like acknowledging it. Okay, I feel nervous. I know why. I'm just gonna breathe into that or channel it. That's usually how I do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to start to understand the emotions you were feeling?
Oh, that's a good question. We did so in grad school, we do a lot of work on that. And then also just through, because you train and you obviously want to work, you want to work on the things that you're going to be working with other people on, right? You want to practice what you preach. So a lot of the training in grad school was like that. And how do you really reflect on who you are and, your internal experiences, and then just my own work on my own. And really being intentional with it. And over time, it's just gotten better. So really, I've been out of school 2 years now, and I was in school for 2 years. So about 4 years I've been working on it. Yeah. And I still work on it. Some days are better than others. Some days the emotions do get the best of me, and that's okay because we're all human and it happens. But I work on it as much as I can. Yeah.
So what do you do when your emotions win?
Well, it depends for me. And it depends on the situation too. Sometimes like I'm trying to think. Okay, I'll give you this one's a good one. So like work, right? I run my own business, so I'm my own boss. And I have a to-do list that I have to get done every day. And then I also have like extra things that I'm working on for the future. Sometimes those extra things, or like reaching out to people, those I know create fear and create nervousness. And so I procrastinate them. I push them off and I do all the easier things because I feel better when I do them. They're easy, they're quick, boom, boom, boom. I get my checklist, I feel productive. But I recognize when they win, I don't do those things, right? When they win, I don't do it. I procrastinate it because I don't want to feel the anxiety of calling someone that I don't know and telling them about something that most people don't know about. And so that would look like a win for emotions. And then it's, going back to the drawing board and saying, what's important to me. I know I'm feeling fear, everything that I've been going through. So, and then doing it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
That's awesome. How do you define mental toughness?
That's another question. I think how I describe my approach. So like being able to control focus and be present, allowing internal experiences to happen, right? And understanding that it's just part of being a human, and then figuring out what matters to you most, I would say, is mental toughness.
I like that.
Yeah, that's what I would
because say. I hear it's a buzzword. It's commonly used now. Yeah. Everyone wants to be mentally tough.
Yeah.
But I've not heard a consistent definition of it. Everybody who practices mental performance coaching, counseling, all kind of have their own, this is what it is to me.
Yeah.
And so I was curious as to, why do you think that is?
Well, just like you said, it's like a buzzword.
Okay.
And there's a lot of words. So like one thing that I love to do when I'm talking with clients and they bring up like one of the, like being positive. Okay, tell me what that means to you, because that can mean a lot. Or hardworking. What does that look like to you, right? There's being confident. Oh my gosh, that's a buzzword. And that's like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is it? Right? Some people will say it's a state of being. Some people will say it's an emotion. So, it's like, so I would say that it's just, there's so many definitions out there and there's so many opportunities to make it what you want it to be, that's how people, that's why there's such a there's a difference. And it's really for mental toughness, if we're just staying within, I think it's really just depending on, how, like, mine comes from my approach with the work that I do. You ask a coach, that may come from the way that they were coached when they were younger, and now is a belief of theirs. A person who is a mental performance coach but has a different approach than me may have a different definition as well. And so I think it just depends on the person and what they make of the word. Yeah.
There's also a lot of similarities, which is the cool thing for me is, as I've done more and more of these, I find similarities not only in the mental performance stuff where everyone has their own kind of definitions and styles of how they do it, but also in greatness and pursuing greatness, that people think of it in different ways. Some people think great is an accolade. Some people think great is, how you live your life. Some people think, great is a bunch of different things. Yeah. And so it's interesting to try to piece that all together to continuously get improvement in our lives. And so that's kind of one of the fun things for me, is trying to figure out how all that fits together. So we covered a lot of stuff today. I feel really good about where we went with all this. Did I miss anything as far as what you do and what you offer your clients and athletes that you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
I mean, not necessarily. I think just going off of my approach, just understand that you're human and you're a great person, and just do what matters to you. Right. That's going to be helpful and healthy and productive. Right. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. So where can my listeners connect and follow and find what you're doing if they are interested in seeing what's happening in your life and in your career and your path?
So my Instagram is at Coach Nicole _E. That is my Instagram. I'm pretty much active mostly on there. And then I do have a website, NicoleErickson.com, but that's just informational. And if you wanted to reach out, so I would say those are the two best.
Perfect. I will put both of those in the show notes. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a lot of fun to talk. I had an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. As always, guys, keep reaching for the stars. Fall flat on your face, but remember, whenever we fall, always get up. Thank you for joining us today on the Edge of Greatness podcast. If you haven't yet, please take a minute now to subscribe and review our show. Join us again next week as we continue to dig deeper into the key components of greatness. The path to greatness is never linear, so remember to keep pursuing greatness no matter what. Keep stretching your abilities, reach for the stars, and fall flat on your face. But remember, no matter what happens, whenever we fall, always get up. Until next time, I'm Charles Schultz, and this was the Edge of Greatness podcast.